I mean, I'd say it's interesting, if you look at the LinkedIn discussion that's starting now, and when you use the word science, people pick up on the fact they think I mean kind of the technical sides of science, and sports science, and I think all of those things are fabulous, but that isn't what I mean by science. I mean exactly what you've said, the kind of thinking it through, using genuine critical attitude, and I think that's really, really important. The other thing I would say is, my entry point to this was talent development. That's where I actually started, and I've come to the conclusion of, let's say, 20 years of research in talent development, it's impossible. But talent development, if we can develop people's talents, if we can keep people playing, then we're going to have players at different levels with different interests, including the champions, but also the recreational players, and all of their interests will be met. We have to give up this idea that somehow among our population are the gifted or the talented golfers. It's a really, really unhelpful attitude to take. As long as they're playing, as long as they're challenged, the talent will emerge anyway. We don't really need to worry about it. But in the process, we can't do it at the expense of everyone else. So I would say, if you want one take-home point for coaches, it would be give up the pursuit of identification and focus entirely on the development of everyone's talents, keep everyone playing, and then both the talent agenda and the recreation agenda are satisfied. Well, Anita and I were given the remit of the idea of players' perspective on player development. So we were keen to try and put across the idea of learning the success of learning is defined by the learning and the development of the player. So the difficult part for the coach is standing back and saying, my role really only has sense with perspective to what the player's doing. So Anita was looking at it from the point of view of different backgrounds in sport and different perspectives and her different experiences as an elite player and elite coach. My perspective was more to do with long since departed elite player, but more as a scientist. But both of us were trying to put across the point, I think, which is it has to be, as the phrase that Peter Matson today said, has to be player-centred. Player development is fundamentally about player development and player-centred perspective. And I think both of our presentations could be understood as a case for the player-centred argument. There has to be evidence, there has to be science, there has to be a reason for doing things. And coaching, like many things in education, are dominated by tradition and so-called common sense. Well, sometimes they've got value. I think normally they're harmless, but sometimes they do harm. Sometimes they hold people back. If we can't come up with evidence or reason for what we're doing, my inclination is we should think very carefully about whether we should do it at all.